All right, guys, The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. This is the 12th of August, still on book one. The longest thus far, I think. One of the longest journal entries or letters written to his friend. This is the 12th of August. No doubt about it, Albert is the best fellow on earth. Yesterday, the two of us had a remarkable scene. I called on him to take my leave, for I was in the mood for riding out into the hills, which is where I am riding from now. As I was pacing up and down his room, that I noticed his pistols. Lend me your pistols, I said, for my journey. By all means, said he, if you will take the trouble to load them. I only have them there pro forma. I guess like for show. I took one of them down and he continued, my caution backfired on me quite nastily, and ever since I have wanted nothing to do with such things. I was curious to hear the story. For a good 3 months, he told me, I was staying in the country at a friend's, and I had a brace of pistols with me, which I kept unloaded and slept well. Then one rainy afternoon, when I was sitting about doing nothing, for some reason it occurred to me that we might be attacked. We might need the pistols. We might, you know how it is. I gave them to the servant to clean and load, and he was fooling about with the maid, trying to scare her when God knows how the gun went off, with the ramrod still in the barrel, and shot the rod straight through the girl's right hand, smashing her thumb. So I got all the weeping and wailing, and had the doctor's bill to pay as well, and since then I have kept all my guns unloaded. My dear chap, what use is caution? We cannot anticipate every possible danger, but still. Now you well know that I like the man dearly, but I can draw the line at his but still. After all, can we not take it for granted that every general rule has its exceptions? But he is so scrupulous, and if he thinks he has made some over hasty or generalized or half true statement, he will not stop offering you qualifications and amendments and riders, till in the end the substance of what he has said has disappeared. On this occasion he preached a veritable sermon, and finally I ceased to listen to him, fell to brooding, and suddenly placed the mount of the pistol against my forehead, above my right eye. What rot, said Albert, taking the pistol from me. What are you playing at? It isn't loaded, I said. Even if it isn't, he retorted impatiently. What are you up to? I cannot imagine how a man can be so foolish as to shoot himself. I find the mere thought repellent. Why is it, I demanded, that when people speak of things, they must promptly pronounce them foolish or clever or wicked or good? Whatever does it all mean? Have you really grasped the true and inmost nature of an action? Can you really give a definite account of the reasons why it happened and why it had to happen? If you understood them, you might not judge so hastily. But you will grant that certain actions are wrongful, said Albert, no matter what their motives. I shrugged and conceded the point. And yet, my dear friend, I went on, there are exceptions to that rule too. True, it is wrong to steal, but if a man goes thieving to save himself and his family from starvation, are we to pity him or punish him? Who will first cast the stone? If a husband sacrifices his unfaithful wife and a worthless seducer in the heat of his righteous wrath, or if a girl abandons herself for one joyful hour to the irresistible pleasures of love, even our laws, cold-blooded and pedantic as they are moved to relent and forego punishment. That is entirely different, answered Albert, because a man wholly under the influence of his passions has lost his ability to think rationally and is regarded as intoxicated or insane. Ah, you sensible people, I cried with a smile. Passions, intoxication, insanity. You are so calm and collected, so indifferent, you respectable people, tut-tutting about drunkenness and holding unreasonable behavior in contempt, passing by like the priest and thanking God like the Pharisee that you were not as other men. I have been intoxicated more than once. My passions have never been far off insanity, and I have no regrets because I have come to realize in my own way that people have always felt a need to decry the extraordinary men who accomplished great things, things that seemed impossible, as intoxicated and insane. How intolerable it is in everyday life, too, to hear them say the moment anyone does something remotely free or noble or out of the ordinary, the fellow's drunk, he's off his head. You should be ashamed of yourselves, you sensible people, you sages. That's a beautiful quote right there. These are your usual fanciful thoughts, said Albert. You exaggerate everything, and in this case, at least, you are certainly wrong to compare suicide, which is what we were talking about, with great accomplishments, since it cannot be considered as anything but a weakness. After all, it is easier to die than to endure a harrowing life with fortitude. I was on the point of breaking off our conversation, for no argument so throws me as when somebody trots out a meaningless platitude when I am speaking straight from the heart. However, I controlled myself, since I had often heard the comment and had still more often been annoyed at it, and rejoined with some warmth. You call it weakness? Beware of being deceived by appearances. So that's how he's responding to Albert. You call it weakness? Beware of being deceived by appearances. If a nation is groaning under the unendurable yoke of a tyrant, is it weakness to rebel at last and shatter the chains? If a man shocked to find his house on fire senses his strength is heightened so that he can easily carry some burden he could barely lift in calmer moments, or if a man is so enraged by an insult that he takes on 6 opponents and overcomes them, would you call them weak? Well, my good friend, if such exertions are to be seen as strength, why should the greatest of endeavors be thought the opposite? Albert considered me and remarked, Pray pardon me, but the examples you mentioned seem to have no bearing on what we are discussing. That may well be, said I. People have often accused me of having an incoherent way of arguing, but let us see if there is any other way of imagining the state of mind of a man who resolves to throw off his burden of life, a burden which is so pleasant as a rule. We may only speak of a matter, after all, if we have felt it. Human nature, I went on, has its limits. It can take joys, sorrows, and pain up to a certain point, but is annihilated once the threshold is crossed. The question, therefore, is not whether a man is weak or strong, but whether he can endure the full extent of his sufferings, be they of a moral or physical nature. And in my opinion, it would be as misconceived to call a man cowardly for taking his own life as it would be to say a man who dies of a malignant fever was a coward. What a paradoxical, what paradoxical absurdities! Exclaimed Albert. Not as paradoxical as you might suppose, I replied. You conclude, or you concede, that if a disease so severely attacks our constitution as to wear away or suspend our powers of resistance, so that we cannot recover of our own accord or regain our normal way of life through some happy counterattack, we call it sickness unto death. Let us now apply this to the spirit, my dear friend. Consider a man confined within his bounds, influenced by his impressions, beset by ideas, till one day a growing passion overthrows his contemplative composure and destroys him. Consider a man confined within his bounds, influenced by impressions, beset by ideas, till one day a growing passion overthrows his contemplative composure and destroys him. It is all in vain if a calm and sensible man grasps the condition of this unfortunate, all in vain if he advises him, just as it would be vain for a healthy man standing by a sick bed to want to impart even the slightest part of his own strength to the invalid. What do you, sorry, like what would you know about what I'm going through, sort of thing, you know? Albert found this all too general. I reminded him of a girl who had been found drowned in the river not long ago, and told him her story once again. She was a good young creature who had grown up in the narrow environment of household tasks and a weekly routine of work. She had no greater pleasures to look forward to than to dress up on a Sunday in the finery she'd gradually managed to buy and go for a stroll around town with her friends, or perhaps on special feast day to go dancing, and the rest of the time to spend some lively and warm-hearted hour chatting with a neighbor about the causes of some quarrel or the motives behind some ill-intentioned gossip. At length her fiery nature sensed deep-seated needs which the flatteries of men made more urgent. Bit by bit she lost her taste for her former pleasures, until one day she met a man to whom she was irresistibly attracted and for whom she felt unfamiliar feelings. And so she attached all her hopes to him, forgot the world about her, heard and saw and felt nothing but him, her one and only, and was consumed with longing for her one and only. Her one and only pleasures were the empty ones of inconstant vanity, but none the less all her wishes aimed at being his, and finding in an everlasting union with him all of the happiness she lacked, all of the joy she longed for. He made repeated promises that assured the certain He made repeated promises that assured the certainty of her hopes, and the bold caresses that inflamed her desires quite overpowered her soul. She floated in a barely conscious, dreamlike state, anticipating every conceivable joy, tense with the utmost excitement, and finally stretched out her arms to embrace the fulfillment of all her wishes, and her lover deserted her. Damn. Stunned, insensible, she totters on the brink of the abyss. All this darkness around her, she understands nothing. She has no hope, no consolation. He has deserted her. He who made her feel alive. She can see neither the wide world before her nor the many others who could compensate for her loss, like other men. She feels alone, forsaken by the whole world, and driven to despair by the terrible suffering in her heart. She plunges blindly into the depths to drown her torment in the great embrace of death. That, you see, is the story of many a mortal, dear Albert. And now tell me if it is not a case of sickness. Nature cannot find the way out of the labyrinth where all a soul's powers are confused and at odds, and the poor mortal must die. Woe to anyone who can look on and say, the foolish girl, if only she had waited and let time heal. Her despair would have passed, and she would have found someone else to comfort her. One might as well say, the fool, to die of a fever, if only he had waited till he recovered. His strength, his fluids were improved, and his blood was calmer. It would all have been well, and he would still be alive today. Albert, who could still not see the point of comparison, made some more objections, one of them being that I had only spoken of an ignorant girl, but he was unable to grasp how a man of sense, who was not so limited and had a broader perspective, might be excused. My friend, I cried, humankind is merely human, and that jot of rational sense a man may possess is of little or no avail once passion is raging and the bounds of human nature are hemming him in. Hmm. Quite the contrary, but more of that another time. So saying, I picked up my hat. Oh, my heart was full to bursting, and we parted without either having understood the other. But then it is never easy for men to understand each other in this world. A beautiful book.